What if I told you that the same skills used to talk someone down in a hostage crisis could actually help you become a better parent, partner, boss, or generally just a calmer human in an already chaotic world? Today's guest is not your average communicator. Scott Harvey spent over 20 years in law enforcement as a hostage negotiator, trained by the FBI and trusted in the most high stake environment moments, and called in when everything was on the line. He's de escalated people that were on the edge and walked into rooms that were thick with tension and then spoken words that have literally saved lives. But Scott's not just a crisis whisperer, he's also a leadership coach, a keynote speaker, and the author of Silent Kills, a book that teaches us how communication breaks down when we need it the most, and more importantly, how to stop that from happening. In today's episode, Scott opens a door to a world very few of us will ever see: real negotiations, real pressure, and the human psychology that drives it all. But more than that, he gives us the tools that we all can use: how to stay calm under pressure, and how to speak when it matters the most, and how to listen like your life or someone else's depends on it. Welcome to Stefanie, where every week I'm going to introduce you to the people behind jaw-dropping, life-altering, true stories from all over the world. I'm Stefanie Jones, TV host, storyteller, and your partner in crime for the wildest podcast ride you've ever been on. Each episode, you'll hear shocking stories that'll make you realize we humans are capable of anything. Now, let's spill the tea. Scott, welcome to Stefanie. Your story was absolutely fascinating, and the career that you've had is one in a million, one that most people do not come across in their everyday lives. So I'm so glad you're talking with me today. You have literally built your career on being the calm in the middle of a crazy storm when things are going on all around you. You are the one anchor holding things together. Tell me what drew you to this career path in the first place. Why hostage negotiation?
I got into law enforcement fairly early on in my career. I was 23 years old when I joined the police department. I guess I didn't realize at the time the police are kind of the cleanup patrol. Like, everybody calls the police after everything has already hit the fan, and we try to put things back together again. And it's very tiring and it's very frustrating doing that. And so it wasn't very long into my career before I got more prevention focused. So I got trained as a hostage negotiator just 2 years into my law enforcement career because I got tired of watching people pile poor decision on top of poor decision in an effort to undo the first poor choice. I knew as a middle of three brothers, I have two brothers, one older and one younger. The middle is usually the peacemaker. I don't like a fight. I'm avoiding fights. I'm always negotiating between those two because they've never been wrong a day in their life.
Of
And so I'm like,
course.
I can do this. I can get trained in this, and I can help people stop the snowball of poor decisions. Like, it doesn't matter how we got here to where you're talking to a hostage negotiator. How do we make the next 5 minutes better for you? Let's forget everything that happened before. I can't change that. Neither can you. So I just got trained in prevention focused things. I got very, very good at communicating in high risk situations, talking people out of making things worse. And it dawned on me that I could retire at 20 years. So I'd be 43. At the time, I would have two teenage daughters, and staying home collecting a pension check is not the type of life that they would like to have. And so 8 years before retirement, I started speaking professionally. I started speaking at conferences and doing trainings. I can teach people how to be better communicators. Then their life becomes more successful, their relationships become deeper, and everything in their life works better. And my frustration is, in a world where it's easier to communicate than ever, a lot of people are doing it poorly. One thing you'll hear from me: mistakes aren't fatal. The one thing you can't recover from is silence. Because in a world as noisy as ours, silence without rapport feels like you don't care. So I tell people in the corporate world, it's so much easier to fix saying the wrong thing than it is to undo the damage of you saying nothing when everybody was waiting on you to say something. So giving people the courage to communicate through any situation is what I do today to pay the bills.
Wow. Well, you said so many things there that were very impactful. I'm blown away already. Let's rewind a little bit back to when obviously you realized that communication was your very strong skill and you were being trained by the FBI. What did that training actually involve? What did you have to do to learn these skills or to hone in on what you had already built a basis on?
We got into brain science, like how our brain
Mm,
processes communication, what stress does to our ability to communicate, because I never talked with somebody who wasn't under a ton of stress. Like if you're
mhm,
talking to a hostage negotiator, you're having a bad day. We learned about how to deal with suicidal people. Also, a lot of those trainings were practical exercises. So it wasn't uncommon for us in training to be on the phone with somebody for 4, 6, 8 hours, just talking through the situation. And honestly, more than once during those trainings, the person on the other end would end up killing themselves or somebody else. But if you're going to fail, you want to fail in training because that's where we learn, right? So we want to figure out what doesn't work in a safe environment so that when we're
mhm,
out in the real world and it does matter, that we're saying the appropriate things. I love the ability to communicate, but it is a skill that people just need to develop. We're not born communicators, but it is a skill that can be learned.
What surprised you most when you was dealing with some of those trainings and you were being put in fake scenarios, but ones
Mhm.
of the worst kind where the outcome wasn't particularly great? What surprised you the most about being a successful negotiator? Was there one particular thing that you quickly learned, you know what, this tactic seems to work really well?
Yeah, and it's one that most people don't think about. But what I tell folks is I never, as a negotiator, I never talked somebody into doing something. I listened people into doing things. And so listening today in communication is a superpower. If you are a good listener, your communication automatically goes up. So as a negotiator, what I had to do was ask good questions. I had to ask about what was important to them, what they valued, how we got here, what was life like for them, because I need to craft a solution to their problem that
Mm,
allows them to check as many priorities as possible, right? If their kids were important to them, can I orchestrate a time when they come out safely that they can see their kids before they're taken away? Can I do some things that would keep this out of the media so that their kids aren't exposed to this as much as possible? Those are the type things that only by listening could I realize that they actually valued. And you show me the meanest, most ruthless, cutthroat person in the world, there's things they value. There are things they
mhm,
hold dear. And sometimes those are deeply guarded secrets. And you have to be listening and you have to ask the right questions to see what's being said, but sometimes more importantly, what's not being said. What are things that they say, hey, we're not talking about that? That's
mhm.
something we need to put into a file in our brains because that's potentially a hot button issue or it's something that they feel very passionately about. And so those are things you have to be very, very careful with because the last thing we want to do is upset them. But we do want to build a level of rapport with them that allows us to discuss these deep matters because they make a difference in the outcome of the negotiations. So listening is the most important form of negotiation.
When you're learning to deal with very extreme psychological pressure,
Mhm.
what's it like in the moment when it is simply not theory anymore? It's real life. How do you deal with that? And what's it like when someone's life literally on the line? They could hurt themselves, they could hurt
Yeah.
somebody else. That moment really struck me when you just said, you know, their children might be watching on television, let's say if something horrendous is
Yeah.
happening. How do you deal with that?
I think one of the things we get a bad rap for in law enforcement, and I understand why, is people say, well, they turn off their emotions. They disconnect emotionally from the world. And there is some truth to that. We have to do that because the most valuable thing I ever learned as a negotiator is in everybody's brain is a teeter-totter. And on one end of that teeter-totter is emotion. I don't care what that emotion is, fear, anger, frustration, joy, whatever. On the
Mhm,
other end of that teeter totter is logic and reason. So when emotions go up, logic and reason go down. So as a negotiator, I'm dealing with somebody who's highly emotional, which
mhm,
means they're not physiologically capable of processing logic and reason at that time. This is why when you've come home or your spouse has come home from a hard day, and let's say your spouse starts venting and and you spit out a very logical solution to their problem, and they blow right past it, like they didn't even hear it because they are not able to process it. Now, 2 hours later, if they've vented, if they've gotten it out and spent some time thinking about it, when logic and reason come back up, they might come to you with that solution because now they're able to process it. So, as a negotiator, knowing every person I dealt with was imbalanced on the emotion side, which
Mhm.
meant I needed to keep my emotions in check. I needed to be the calm. The louder somebody yelled at me as a police officer, the quieter I talked back to them. Now, not to be patronizing because that can be insulting, but just because I need to start de escalating this. Because
Mhm.
while they're emotional, they're not thinking clearly. And I need them to think clearly. So sometimes as a negotiator, that meant when I made contact with them every time, they yelled at me, they cussed me out, they threatened me, they threatened my family, and then they would hang up. And I'd call them right back. And they'd yell at me and because as they're yelling, that emotion is starting to come down. And I need that emotion to come down. In the real world, what we tend to do when somebody hits us with high emotion is we get emotional and we're like, well, they don't know who they're talking. I don't need to listen to this crap. And we just
Mhm.
start getting emotional ourselves, and neither person calms down. It just ratchets
Mhm.
up and ratchets up until it's way out of control. So, what I would tell people is the more loud somebody is, the quieter you have to be. Now, the problem in law enforcement today, Stephanie, in my opinion, is we spend a lot of time with logic and reason really high and emotion really low. We try to take emotion out of it because that's a good way to stay alive. We have to make split second decisions that have lifelong ramifications, and we don't have time for emotion. Really good way to stay alive, horrible way to live a life because emotion is in every situation. And when we try to take it out, we come across as cold and unfeeling. So, understanding that teeter totter is a game changer for communication for us today. Because when I see somebody and they hit me with all they've got, I understand their teeter totter is imbalanced. It's not personal. And what I've learned, Stephanie, in the business world and the negotiation world, if I remain calm, 9 times out of 10, they apologize later on. Once their teeter totter has righted itself. And I tell them, you were under a lot of stress, no judgment, right? Because when I'm under stress, I say things I don't mean all the time. So understanding that teeter totter it's the secret to effective communication today.
So obviously, every day we have situations, whether it's with work, whether it's with relatives, whether it's husbands, wives, whatever it is.
Hmm.
You were also talking about when you're in situations where sometimes it's life and death and multiple people are involved here.
Yes.
And when someone is screaming at you, I understand in that moment, I'm a very emotional person. I
Hmm.
am not all that logical. I will be honest. My
Yeah.
husband is the logical one, absolutely.
Hmm.
And it made me chuckle to myself when you said earlier, when you come home, you just want someone to vent to. He's a problem solver. Very calm, very rational. If you do X, Y, and Z, this will be done. And I'll be honest, as much as I hate to admit it, he's right. He's right. And I'm like, no, and then this, and then this. So I understand when you said people just need to simmer down.
Yes.
But when someone is coming at you, threatening your family, and these aren't everyday normal people that are
Right.
you meet at the supermarket. We're talking
Right.
about criminals, we're talking about people that have taken someone hostage, very intense. How on earth do you stay calm when someone is threatening the things that you hold most dear? Do you feel like, oh, this is so far removed from my life, that's never going to happen? Because most people, if you're threatening someone's family, their friend, whatever it is, that
Mhm.
would instantly trigger them even more. So, how did you stay so calm?
We've got to withhold judgment because we all make poor choices when we're under high emotion. That teeter totter gets
Mm,
all of us, right? So if we don't rise to the bait, because honestly, as a negotiator, what I knew is the person on the other end of the phone did not want to talk to me. They
mm,
wanted me to be the bad guy. They wanted me to be the jerk. They wanted me to be the reason they're in this situation, right? And
yeah,
so I can't rise to that. I can't rise to their bait. If they can get me upset and get me yelling, now they're in control. And I can't have them in control because if they're in control, this works out badly. So
yeah.
I have to allow them to think they're in control while the whole time it's actually me that's in control because I'm outside of their area. They're inside of a building surrounded by police officers with guns pointed at them. They're not going anywhere and they have very little control. I'm the one with the control. But I tell leaders all the time, if you have to tell somebody you're in control, you're not in control. So as a negotiator, if I could control my emotions, I knew the chances of this working out were much higher. Working out for us meant nobody else gets harmed. No more hostages. Even the bad guy comes out unharmed. That's the win for us. No police officers are harmed. And
Yeah.
so we have a lot at stake here. I have to build a level of rapport with them where they start trusting me very, very
Mhm.
quickly. Somebody they've never met before, somebody who is seen as the enemy because I'm a police officer, but they need to see me as their ticket out of there.
Let's talk about the first ever live hostage negotiation that you
Mhm.
had. What was that like? There's no longer training. This is real life. What was going through your mind? What was the situation and what happened?
We had a situation where we were called to a house. This guy had a warrant. He was needed to be arrested. And when the police showed up, he started shooting out the door. He didn't hit anybody, but he shot his gun out the door. He's yelling things. He's saying, you're not coming in. I'm not coming out. He's shooting out the walls of his house, which actually were hitting the walls of neighbors' houses. And so when I get there, patrol has the area surrounded. He's not come out of the house. He's still inside. So when I make contact with him, he's obviously upset. He's screaming, "Get off my property," which I need to know as a negotiator. If he's telling me I can see that officer at my mailbox, I need to tell command, hey, the guy at the mailbox, he can be seen. Because if he can be seen, he can be shot. So I'm actually
Mhm.
relaying information to command to say these officers need to find a better place to be because if this guy decides to shoot out a window, they could be hit. So I
Mm.
make contact with him and we talked for several hours. Uh, I could hear ice clinking in a glass while he's talking to me. So I just asked, "What are you drinking?" He's like, "I'm drinking bourbon. We're in Kentucky, so everybody has bourbon. It's almost the law, right?" So he's drinking bourbon, but I also know that's going to make his teeter totter more imbalanced. That's going to bring logic and reason further away. And I said, "Hey, buddy, I like bourbon. When this is said and done, you and I can get a drink if we decide to. Why don't you set that down for me right now while we're talking?" If I could get him to stop drinking, the chances of him riding his teeter totter go up. So we had built enough rapport to where he decides to set that down. After several hours of negotiations, thankfully nobody else was in the house with him. It was what we call a barricaded individual. So we can't leave because he needs to go to jail, right?
Mhm.
Especially since he's been shooting his gun at outside of his house and that kind of stuff. So he had a friend that he trusted in a neighboring police department. It was within our same area, but wasn't the ones that were running the negotiations. And he had dealt with him before. He felt like that officer was fair. And I said, "Listen, if I get that officer here to make sure that you're safe, will you come out?" He says, "If I know he's there, I know he'll make sure you guys are not going to hurt me." Because that's their biggest fear, Stephanie. The two scariest times as a negotiator is when you first make contact, because that's the most emotional they're ever going to be. And that's the hardest to talk to they're going to be,
Yeah.
and the surrender. Because during the surrender, when they walk out, they are giving up their illusion of control.
Yeah.
And things can go bad very quickly. So we have to be very specific. You have to come out with your hands up. Don't reach for anything. Do exactly what the police tell you to do, and you'll be taken into custody safely. And then I'll come talk to you. Because if I don't tell him step by step what to expect, if he reaches for a cell phone or something like that, he could get shot. This is a very dangerous individual who's already been firing weapons. He was thankfully taken into custody with no issues, but when they cleared his house to make sure nobody was in there, he had guns and ammunition staged in every room of his house, right in the middle. He was ready, if we came in, to go out in a blaze of glory. It was about 4 or 5 hours altogether. The negotiations were that I had developed enough level of rapport with this guy. He felt like we had developed enough rapport that he could trust us, and he came out and he got the help that he needed. And We keep files on these people because they have a high rate of recidivism, meaning they're likely to do this again. Chances are they're poor decision makers. And especially when you negotiate successfully, they actually weren't hurt. And so they feel safer when they get into a situation to just do it all over again. So now, if we have a file on this person, I now know who they are, what they believe in, what they value, and we don't start from square one.
So based on what you just said, if they've done it once and they feel safe, they pretty much know this, the outcome probably the second time if they do it again. So they're more likely to be like, I'm going to be okay if I do this again.
Yes.
How many times have you re-met the same person and had to
I
talk to them again?
I've not re-met them in a negotiation situation, but I
Okay.
have re-met a lot of people a second time that I had dealt with a first time, whether I had arrested them or something. I
Mhm.
live in the same city that I was a police officer in. So I'm at the grocery store, I'm at the fast food joint, whatever. And I was always one who believed in being kind to people. Now, that being said, Stephanie, I can kindly take somebody to the ground, right? I can kindly arrest you, but I'm going to do it kindly as much as I can. I arrested a guy one night who threatened me once I arrested him and said he would run over me with his car if he saw me walking up the street. And I just didn't rise to the bait. I charged him with terroristic threatening. You can't say things like that because that's a threat to somebody. Um, and I was just kind to him. And the next day, I kid you not, I'm standing in line at Wendy's and I'm holding my 2-year-old daughter in my arms, and this guy's in line in front of me. Like, I recognize him. I don't know if he recognizes me because he was highly intoxicated the night before. But he turns around, he glances at me and he sees me and he turns back around. And then about 2 minutes later, he turns around again and he goes, I was a big jerk and you were nice. And I'm sorry. I said, you were drunk. We make poor choices when we're drunk. No judgment here. Had I been a jerk to that guy the night before, which would have been easy to do, all
Yeah.
he would have remembered was that Sergeant Harvey was a jerk to him and he would felt
Mm.
justified in how he treated me. Because I treated him differently than he treated me, he was just left with, he took care of me even when I was making poor choices. Uh, and as a dad, Stephanie, that's value for me too, because a lot of times my daughters have done things I didn't agree with, but I can't lose my cool over them because the small things they do that I lose my cool over, they won't come to me with the big things. So there might be consequences, but we're not going to scream and yell and stuff like that. I consciously make a decision to try to maintain my teeter totter because teenage girls are generally on the emotional side, right? They're emotional creatures. I grew up with two brothers, so this was new to me. But sometimes they need dad to be calmer.
Being able to regulate your own emotions is it's hard, especially when
Yeah.
things are heated, things are on the line, especially if it's someone you care about or your own children.
Hmm.
And when you were telling me about being in the line at Wendy's, I at my personal reaction, if I would have been someone that had said, I'm gonna run you and your children over
Hmm.
in your car or whatever, I would have been to probably turn around and leave. I'd have been scared in all honesty.
Right.
Um, so the fact that you remained so calm and, was a pleasant interaction, as
Hmm.
pleasant as it possibly could be,
Hmm.
is fantastic. And I just I don't know how most people I don't know what you can tap into or channel to keep that level of calmness, I suppose. Or
Yeah. It's the only thing we control, right? The only thing in this world I have a complete control over is me. There are times I have been out of control because I'm human. And those are the times that we need to honestly apologize and make it right afterwards. But if I control me and the other person still flies off the handle or they still make a poor choice, I've done all I can do. I'm responsible for my actions. I'm not responsible for the outcome. Live a life where you're controlling you and you're not trying to control the outcome. Let's control our effort. Let's control our attitude and then let the outcome be the outcome. And that's easier said than done. I get that. Whatever happens, happens.
you very openly talk about silence kills.
Yes.
Not just in a metaphorical sense, but what happens sometimes in those high stake moments when no one speaks up?
That's one of my pet peeves when it comes to the business world because When there's a crisis in our business, whether it's with employees or we had a product that failed or something, the knee jerk response is to shut down communication because they're so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they say nothing. Silence without rapport feels like you don't care. By not saying anything, you don't kill the story. You just lose control of the narrative. Because in your silence, people are going to fill in the reasons that we're not talking about this. And if it's an internal problem and nobody's talking about it and everybody knows it's happened, your team members will start looking for another place to work because it feels like you don't care.
Mm.
Now, as I've said earlier, rapport is the secret sauce. And so when you're dealing with a personnel issue or something like that, let's say you have a team member that comes in who's visibly upset and you ask them, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "I'm fine." But you can tell they're not fine. It just depends on your level of rapport. If you have a high level of rapport, you might just decide to sit with that team member until they are able to talk. Because sometimes our presence is comforting and I'm not leaving you while you're upset, but I don't need to know the details. I'm just going to be here. If you don't have a high level of rapport, it's not somebody you deal with all the time, say, I don't know that you're okay. You look upset. If I can do anything for you, please let me know. And then you just give them their space. You're not being silent about the obvious problem, but you're just giving them the space to come to you if they need anything. And I have employers that say all the time, "Well, Scott, I don't have the time for that kind of stuff." I'm like, "Okay, then you should make the time to train a new employee when that one leaves because they feel like nobody in their office cares."
Yeah.
Because silence without rapport feels like we don't care. And when you don't talk about or don't deal with the elephant in the room, it just feels like you don't care and they will leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have spent 5 to 10 minutes that day investing in them, or you can spend 20 hours to 30 hours training a new team member.
I mean, it makes so much sense. And it's like having the time and the empathy and just the willingness as well
Yeah.
to give up like a bit longer in my day, or like you say, I'm going to have to put myself out here, whether it's a bit uncomfortable or it's something that's happened, to address it. But those are the things, like you say, that will make people believe in you as a leader for sure, want to
Mhm.
stay with you and your team, and also the experience that they have in the entire company or business, right?
Mhm.
Or I say in the relationship, whatever friendship, whatever it might be. It's like
Mhm.
how much they're willing to sacrifice themselves to make it about you or whoever it is in that moment, right?
Yeah. And it's also how we grow our team because if we're
Mm.
investing in these moments, our team members will tell their friends, "I
Mm-hmm.
love where I work." And when there's an
Exactly.
opening, they'll tell their friends, "You need to apply because this is a
Mm-hmm.
place that actually cares about people." And let's be
Yeah.
honest, Stephanie, we can't pay somebody what they're worth. Somebody will
Mm-hmm.
always pay them more. But culture is something that you can't monetize. Culture is something that will keep people, and that's invaluable in the business world. When we invest in our team and we listen to them, we're not the ones doing the talking as the leader. We need to be listening, just like a hostage negotiator. I need to ask good questions. I need to listen to the answers, and I need to craft wins for them that allow them to check as many win boxes for them as possible.
So in a hostage situation, the win box for them is kind of small. It's basically staying alive, I suppose, right?
That we hope. Now, if somebody is truly suicidal, Stephanie, it's very difficult to negotiate because
Okay.
I need them to want to get out of this in order for this to be really successful, right? And
Right.
so if somebody is truly suicidal, then it becomes more important that we talk about the things that they hold near and dear. Is it their kids? Is it their parents? Is it a good friend? Then how are those people going to process your suicide? You're out
Mm.
immediately, right? They're the ones who will spend the rest of their life unpacking this and asking themselves, could I have done something to prevent this? So that's why it's more important when somebody is suicidal, even to find what do they truly value, what's important to them. And sometimes they're saying things like, well, I'm already in this situation. My kids already hate me. Hate and feeling responsible for your death are two very different emotions. Like we can fix hate, and it starts with you making this situation better right now.
Would Would you say that when someone is suicidal, and sadly that is the option that they take, is one of the worst situations that you've ever walked into this career?
I have been in situations post suicide. I've gone into schools and done assemblies post suicide. And what bothers me the most is to hear people say, well, I can't say I'm surprised. And that breaks my heart because that tells me they saw the signs. They just didn't know how
Mm,
to fix this. And so, one of the things they trained us when it came to suicide is, and I think the general public has a misconception about this, if somebody is suicidal, your best chance of helping them is to ask them, are you planning on killing yourself? Because people are, well, I don't want to plant the suggestion. You're not going to. The research is very clear. If I'm not suicidal and you say, are you planning on killing yourself? I'm not going to say, no, but that sounds like a good idea now. It's just not how the brain works, right?
mm,
If I am having suicidal ideations and you ask me that question, you've now made it okay for me to talk about it, right?
yeah.
Because you've addressed it head on. You've not beat around the bush. If you say, are you planning on hurting yourself? No, it's not going to hurt at all, right? One bullet, pain is over. Like I'm hurting now, the bullet takes the pain away. So it's not going to hurt at all. But if you ask me, are you planning on killing yourself? If I say yes, your next question needs to be, then what is your plan? Do you have a plan? If
Mm,
they do have a plan, we need to get help immediately. We need to get some professionals involved in this. And most people at one time or another have considered killing themselves. It doesn't make you crazy, it actually makes you fairly normal. We've all had
mhm.
a really, really low point where we have thought about that. Most people are not going to have a plan or go beyond this fleeting thought. If I just died, it'd be all over, right? If you say, are you planning on killing yourself? And they say no, and you say, well, how can I help? Right? Because I know you're upset. I know you've got a lot on your plate. What can I do to help? Because what bothered me, Stephanie, was during the COVID pandemic, everybody talked very openly about what their experience with COVID was. I couldn't taste or smell for a week. I felt like I'd been had the flu. Those things were very openly discussed on social media, which meant when we got COVID, because everybody got it at one time or another, we had all of these people's experiences to draw upon, and it normalized our experience. Which meant when I got it, I'm like, this is going to suck for a few days, but I'm going to make it through. When it comes to mental health, we live in a world that doesn't talk about this. And
Yeah.
so, because we don't talk about it, when it happens to me, I feel like everybody else has their crap together. And I'm the only one who can't control his life.
Mhm.
And because I can't openly discuss it, it's very isolating. And because I live in this social media highlight reel world where everybody's photo, everybody's video is the best of their day, and my days are not great right now, I feel like I'm the only one dealing with this.
Yeah.
I wish we would talk about mental health issues like we talked about COVID. When you're dealing with a suicidal person, they want to talk about it. If they didn't,
Mm.
they'd already be dead.
I think if someone does sprinkle any kind of seed or inkling of a message that they're having intrusive thoughts,
Mhm.
that is the time when they desperately need it the most.
Yes.
Um, just to say that out loud, I think takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength, and you're asking for help. And
Yes.
I think a lot of people, sadly, on the other side, don't know how to respond or find it maybe awkward or say, oh, you just need help, talk to a professional or
Yep.
something.
They're so afraid, Stephanie, in my opinion, of saying the wrong thing. They're
Mm,
so afraid they're gonna make it worse. And
yeah.
so they say nothing. Like, I'm open to talk because that's how they survive. That's how they stay alive, is by talking about them openly. When somebody is dealing with depression or suicidal ideation, that's the biggest thing in their brain. And when we don't address that, it feels like we're minimizing the biggest thing happening in their life. When
Yeah.
we do say, how are you really? Because I can tell you're struggling. How's your anxiety today? What's making you anxious today? And we start that conversation with an accepted thing of we all have anxiety. It doesn't mean you're weird. It means you're normal. So how are things today? And they're like, oh yeah, I mean it's good. Is it though? You're like, I've
Yeah.
been there. I've been having days like you've had, and I'd love to help if you'll let me. What can I do?
Yeah. I think people just need to have a little bit more confidence in themselves. Just being there for someone will mean the absolute world and could literally change everything for
Yeah.
them.
Suicide very rarely comes out of nowhere. Almost never. There's signs and symptoms, which once again, to my point, they'll carry that around for the rest of their life. What could I have done to help? What did I overlook? And they'll start looking back over all of their experiences over the last 6 months with this person and say, well, they said that thing that time. I should have picked up on that. You can't bear
Mhm.
the weight of this. They made a poor choice that can't be undone. But when we don't talk about these things, once again, silence without rapport feels like we don't care. And the sad part for me, Stephanie, is it's genuinely a place of caring that keeps people from saying something.
Talking about being scared to say something or having a fear and stress can really drastically change a message if you're feeling it in that moment,
Hmm.
right? When it was you dealing with very stressful situations, whether it was with hostages or family members
Hmm.
in an argument, how do you deal with that when you're feeling frightened or fearful, you know?
I tell business owners and leaders all the time, sometimes we need a timeout, right? When I was a kid, I thought a timeout was the worst punishment known to man because in my day, I had a bed and a window in my room. There was no computer, there was no stereo. It was like prison, and I thought it was awful. So I told myself as a kid sitting in timeout, I'll never give my kids timeout. And then I had kids, and I realized a timeout is not a punishment. A timeout is a chance for a parent to write their own teeter totter because I'm so angry right now, I'm going to say or do something I can't unsay or undo. And so
Mhm.
sending my kid to their room, when I did that well, would sometimes end with me going in their room 20 minutes later and apologizing. I got upset. I should not have gotten upset. I'll try harder next time and I'm sorry. In the work
Mhm.
environment, when we feel ourselves getting very emotional and very stressed, we may need to tell somebody, I want to finish this conversation. Can you give me 15 minutes? And during that 15 minutes, you take a walk, you listen to music, you call a friend, you read a book, you do something to let your teeter totter start coming back down.
Yeah.
And then you go back to that meeting. But telling them, I want to finish this conversation. I just need 15 minutes. That
Mhm.
speaks value to them that you want to give this your best brain, and your brain is not best right now. Give me 15 minutes, or can we pick this up in the morning and finish this conversation? Because I do want to work towards a solution.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with that is, Stephanie, the next morning, we're going to downplay the problem. And we're going to get up the
Mhm.
next morning and go, that really wasn't that big a deal. I don't think I need to have this meeting. And we might even tell that person, hey, don't worry about it. No big deal. But there's no resolution there. What's happened is our
Mhm.
teeter totter, the emotions have come back down, which is good. And we now see it as a non issue. But if we don't address it, the next time they do that thing, our teeter totter gets out of balance a lot quicker because they're
Yep.
doing it again. And I tell leaders, I said, they're doing it again because you didn't tell them clearly the first time not to do it, because you let
Yep.
the emotions come back down and you decided it wasn't a big deal. So that's a lack of leadership on our part to decide that meeting doesn't need to happen. I would say it 100% needs to happen once we're back in control of our emotions.
Mhm.
What I would tell
Mhm.
people is when you're going to talk to somebody, when you're going to coach somebody, of course, we do it individually. We praise in public and we correct in private. That's a leadership principle that I believe in firmly. So if I'm going to have a potentially awkward or potentially uncomfortable conversation with somebody, I call that out in the beginning. I
Yep.
call them into the office and say, this could be awkward. This could be uncomfortable. But at the end of it, I want you to be the most successful person you can be. And I want to be very clear on how I can help you do that. I tell them, I'm not going to intentionally offend you. If I say something that you find offensive, please let me know because that's not my goal. But I do at the end of this conversation want both of us to be better. Does that sound like something you could do? And when they say yes, I now have their buy in. I now have permission to have this awkward, uncomfortable conversation because they understand the win is we both are better at the end of it.
Well, that would make me personally, if I was an employee, feel more reassured, you know, like
Yeah.
things are going to be okay. I'm not going to
Yes.
get fired
Yeah.
because that's the worst thing, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yes.
Like you leave work, let's say on a Friday. Oh, when you come back on Monday, we need to have a chat. My
Yes.
brain would
Horrible.
not be able to handle that for an entire I would not be able to stop,
No,
Scott. It would
no.
just kill me.
Yeah.
So
eh, Yep.
that little technique right there could save someone like me from endless misery.
That's something you need to say in the first 30 seconds of conversation.
Yeah.
You don't start that conversation by saying, I just love having you here. You just need to tell them in the beginning, listen, I wish things worked out differently, but we're going to have to part ways today. And then you
Mhm.
can talk about why. You just rip the band-aid off. That's the most loving thing you can.
How do you spot then in a moment where it is maybe uncomfortable or prime example, you negotiating with somebody
Mhm.
when someone's about to snap? When or how do you know like when someone's completely bluffing? So they're just saying it to, whether it is to buy more time or whatever it is. Are there mere tells that everyday people have or that we can look for that we can use?
Yeah, I think if you're face to face, the nonverbals are everything. Don't have a difficult conversation over a text or an email. Bring them in face to face. If you can't get face to face, get on a Zoom call like we're doing now, right? But
Mhm.
the tells you're looking for face to face is when their nonverbals don't match their verbals. When they're talking to you and they're looking over your shoulder, they're looking side to side, like they are feeling threatened. And that's what our
Mhm.
body does. We get into a fight or flight mode, and the lizard brain turns on. And the lizard brain has three options: fight, flight, or freeze. It's like, I'm either going to fight, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to lock up and not be able to do anything. And the problem with the lizard brain being activated is it's immediately high emotion and no logic and reason. Logic and reason
Yeah.
are not invited when we feel threatened. Because when we developed this part of our brain as cavemen or whatever, like if I don't react to the snapping twig behind me, I'm dead. So I
Yeah.
can't think logically, what is that? I just have to react. And in the law enforcement world, that's how we train. It's a very quick reaction that we've practiced over and over again because the lizard brain doesn't allow logic and reason. And
Mhm.
so when you see somebody getting upset, the best thing you can do is ask them, what are you feeling right now? Tell me what you're feeling. Don't tell them what they're feeling. Don't say, are you mad? Are you angry? Because you
Mhm.
want to make somebody mad, tell them how they feel. But if you say, that sounds like that would be frustrating, they're like, I'm not frustrated, I'm angry. Now, that's huge because when they label what they're feeling, the lizard brain turns off. They've done MRIs on this, they've put people under functional MRIs, and they've shown them a picture designed to cause stress. And when they see that picture, the amygdala, the lizard brain, lights up and it stays lit up. And then the people giving the test would say, tell me what you're feeling. They say, I feel sad. I feel angry. I feel
Mhm.
whatever the emotion they're feeling. As soon as they label it, the lizard brain turns off because now it's not a threat. I know where to file it in the cognitive portion of my brain. It's no longer a threat. So when we help somebody label their emotions, we start riding that teeter totter a lot quicker. When they tell
Mhm.
me what they're feeling, I'm feeling frustrated. What's gotten you frustrated today? And now we're talking, but now it's something safe to talk about because they've labeled it. When they
Mhm.
know what it is, it's something we can talk about.
What would you say is the biggest misconception that people have about crisis negotiation or people that are in crisis in general?
I think the biggest misconception is that we're going to make it worse. That's people's biggest fear. That's why people don't get involved in first aid. Is they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to make it worse. Then sit and hold their hand because that'll
Mhm.
calm their blood pressure down. That'll calm their nerve. That'll calm a lot of things, even if you're not trained. You don't have to
Mhm.
be a hostage negotiator to help somebody in crisis. Very few of us are. You just have to be somebody who recognizes that somebody is in crisis
Mm.
and you can do something to help. You're not
Mhm.
going to make it worse. If you just sit next to them and say nothing, your presence is reassuring to them because
Mhm.
being by yourself is way scarier than having somebody with you during the ditch moments of our lives. If I find myself in a ditch, I just want someone to stop. And when somebody is in crisis, you don't even have to know them in order to
Mhm.
be a calming presence for them. That's the best thing we can do for somebody in crisis. Call for help and then just sit with them until help arrives.
Mhm. Gosh. I mean, it's so basic and so simple, yet it seems hard for so many people to do. you know?
Yeah, because it takes time and we think we don't have time. I would say you may be busy and you may not have the time, but if you find out later that that situation got infinitely worse after you left, what are you going to say to yourself?
You've spent all these decades in incredibly intense situations
Mhm.
and obviously having to ask the hard questions, but you also are a husband and a dad, and like you mentioned, you're in a house full of women, right?
Yeah.
You're the only guy standing. So I mean, like, what lessons did you learn in the field that you can bring into your environment where you are one of one and you're surrounded by a completely different species at the end of the day?
Yeah, two things. One, my wife on more than one occasion would say, "Don't negotiate with me, talk to me." Because it's a different way of talking, right? And she could realize when I was being negotiator versus being husband, and she needed to be
Okay.
needed to be husband. So it's different there. So, but it was just asking questions about things I didn't understand. One of the
Mm,
biggest questions as a dad, why is this upsetting? Obviously, you're upset. I'm not saying you shouldn't be. Tell me why, because I don't understand why it's upsetting. I grew up with two brothers. If we were crying, somebody was hurt. With girls, sometimes I found out there's just tears and they don't know why. And
mhm,
accepting that was really hard for me as a dad because I want to help them. And when they don't know why they're crying, all I can do is just sit there while they do it, and just hold them and comfort them. And I don't have to have a solution. I just have to be present. You just have to be a safe place for them to vent and unload. And at the end of that venting and unloading, even if you don't solve their problem, they're going to feel like you care. And that's all we can do. The best way to build rapport, get people to like, know, and trust us is just spend time with them. And so,
mhm,
as a dad of daughters, it took me a lot of years to figure out I don't have to have a solution for this. There's probably not one. I
mhm,
just have to kind of be the calm in the storm. And we just have very open and honest conversations about things today because nothing is off limits. To tell parents all the time, you have to be calm outwardly, even when you're freaking out on the inside. You
mhm,
have to suspend judgment until the crisis is over. And then, more times than not, they'll tell you, I know what I did and I know what I need to do
mhm.
next time. But if you start spouting what you should do and how we fix this right away, while their emotions are high, they can't hear that and they'll just hear somebody that doesn't care. And then later on, when everybody's feeling less emotional, we talk about prevention for next time.
You mentioned something that your wife said to you, and I find that's this really interesting. And I wonder how difficult it may have been for you. I don't know, initially or over time. I'm sure it became more normal. But she said, "Don't negotiate with me. Talk to me."
Yeah.
How hard is that when that is literally your skill, your livelihood? That's how you're used to basically getting what you want out of a situation.
Yeah.
So to go home and to be with your wife where you want obviously the situation to have the outcome that you so desire and it's with the person you care about the most, how hard is that transition?
Yeah. I think what she was saying without saying it was, don't try to get something from me. Because when we're
Mhm.
negotiating, that's what we're doing, right? I'm giving you something
Mhm.
so that you'll give me something. And that's not how a healthy marriage works. A healthy
Mhm.
marriage is not a contract. It's not, if I do this, you do that. And if you do this, I do that. A healthy marriage is, I'm going to do all of this no matter what you do, right? I'm not expecting anything from you. And that's what a good parent does, is we just give. And to the parents out there raising teenagers, like, they won't, that pendulum swings way far away to where they hate you, you're stupid, all of this. As a dad of a 24 and a 20-year-old, it does swing back if you keep your cool, if you don't lose your crap over the fact that they're disrespectful and they swing away from you. And we can still have those conversations about how that's not okay, like, I expect you to be
Mhm.
nicer. But when it does swing back, it swings back pretty hard, that they now realize you loved me when you didn't have to. I appreciate that. And now I can come to you with the hard stuff. So it's
Mhm.
not, when we're negotiating, we're trying to get something from them. When we're just being present and having a conversation and being safe, it's not in the hopes of getting something. I think that's the
Mhm.
difference.
Mhm. Out of all of the negotiations that you've been a part of, has there been one that you'll never forget? It's going to stick with you forever. And what was it?
Um, Negotiation, no. But there was a time where we had a child, 7 years old, was pulled unconscious from our local swimming pool. The lifeguards pulled her out. She was unconscious, unresponsive, said she had drowned. And they sent me to the hospital to keep the media away from the mom. The mom was the only one there with this little girl. And so I arrive at the hospital and I didn't know mom was by herself. I just walked into the emergency room and she immediately sees a police uniform. And so she runs up to me and she starts talking about how her daughter didn't feel good that morning at 7 years old and didn't want to come to the pool. She goes, but I made her come to the pool. And here we are at the hospital and she's crying and feeling responsible. And the doctor comes out and tells the mom that he wasn't able to revive her 7-year-old daughter. And so she just falls into my arms and he says, you can come in and see her if you want to. And she looks at me and she goes, will you come with me? Like, I don't know this woman. We've spent 30 minutes together while they worked on her daughter, but I'm the only one there. So yeah, I'll come in. I'll never forget walking into that ER room and seeing a little girl with a breathing tube sticking out of her mouth with nothing attached to it. Like, that's an image that will forever be part of my brain. And the mom just sat down next to her and stroked her hair and sang her a song. And it was horrible. But I was the only one there, and so I can't leave. I wanted to leave selfishly because this was a lot. I wanted to tap out, but I just stayed present, and I was just there. 4 days later, I had a speaking event at a town about an hour from here, and I had seen on social media that her daughter's funeral was in that same town, literally an hour after my speaking event. So I told my wife, and my wife's like, then I'm going with you, because we had talked a lot about this. And so she went with me to the event, and then we went to this funeral. I didn't think the mom would recognize me because I'm out of uniform. But she comes running up and she hugs me, and she said, I found out she didn't drown. She goes, she had a massive heart defect. She had a heart attack and she died in the pool. And I looked at her, I said, she would have had that same heart attack sitting at home watching cartoons. You took her to the pool and a trauma nurse did CPR on her and she's 200 yards from the hospital. Like, you put her in the best place she could have survived this. That relieves you of so much guilt and so much shame. And the reason I share that story, Stefanie, is because it just showed me the power of presence. I
Yeah,
can't solve her
absolutely.
problem. I can't
Yeah.
make this better. I can't bring her, but I can just be a dad who's with a
Mm,
mom while she's hurting.
yeah.
And then to see the relief on her face to say it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
I did everything I could by making my daughter. That's why she didn't feel well, because she was having a heart attack at 7 years old that nobody knew was coming. And so those type of things that you just pack around in your brain for the rest of your life. And that's why when I was in the police department, it's a 20-year retirement, because you get a lot of those things. I've seen more than my fair share of dead children. I've seen more than my fair share of people's poor choices ending badly. And so your brain stores up those things. And so it'll only hold so much. So that particular one, though one of my hardest days at work, was also one of my most rewarding because she had nobody. And there I was, and the media never showed up that day. I wasn't sent there to deal with the media. I was sent there to comfort a mom. I just didn't know it at the time.
Looking back, obviously things can always be done differently in certain circumstances. Was there a moment where you did ever fail, and how do you recover from the moments where you're like, I wish that had been different?
I mean, if you can catch it in the moment, there's sometimes you can say, I'm sorry, that came out wrong. And just admit, like, I messed this up,
Mhm.
That's the best case scenario. If you
Yeah.
can't catch it in the moment, that's more difficult and more awkward because you've actually got to apologize to them after the fact. You've got to seek them out and you've got to say, hey, and not make an excuse. There was times as a police officer I had to do that. There was times where I would find somebody out and I would say, I was really short with you yesterday. I was preoccupied and I'm sorry. I didn't have time yesterday. Should have made time. I didn't. Tell me your story. Because once you learn somebody's story, they feel valued and they'll extend you more grace.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people still in this town. I still live in the town that I retired from the police department here that know me and will come and tell me things they won't tell anybody else because they knew I was somebody who could be trusted to not abuse that information.
Talking about stories, you've written your own book, Silence Kills,
Yes.
which has sold many, many, many copies.
Yes.
Tell me, when you were writing the book, was there a particular person in mind that you wrote it for? Like, and what do you hope stays with the readers after long after they finish that last page?
I wrote it for the person who is scared to speak up. Because they're scared of making the situation worse. They're scared of saying the wrong thing. Like I've said before,
Hmm.
saying the wrong thing is a lot easier to recover from than saying nothing. Silence, as I said in the title, silence kills businesses, it kills relationships. If you show me a marriage where the husband and wife are no longer speaking, it's only a matter of time before the divorce is final because they
Hmm.
both decided this is something not worth saving. And so we're not going to talk about it.
Yep.
When we're actually having arguments and we're having discussions that move the ball forward, like we're fighting for each other and not fighting with each other, that's a difference. Like we're going to resolve this because if we don't, the consequences of not resolving it are going to be worse. Right.
Hmm.
And so encouraging people to have uncomfortable conversations, to embrace the awkward. And if you
Hmm.
run from the uncomfortable things, you will never get to the awesome that's on the other side.
Oh. Well, Scott, I found you absolutely awesome today. You've been so inspiring. Your words are fantastic, very motivational. And I think anybody that has listened to this is going to walk away with so much that they can implement in their own lives.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, for your service, not only to your country, but also to what you're giving, not only my listeners, but the people that read your book as well. Thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you for sharing your platform with me. It's been an honor.
Scott has just given us all a masterclass, not only in communication under immense pressure, but also in humanity. From calming people down in crisis to helping everyday leaders and parents speak with clarity and care, he reminds us all that words can save lives, sometimes literally. If there's one thing that I'm going to be taking away from today's conversation, it's this: that silence might feel safer in the moment, but very rarely does it actually serve us. So, whether you're at the kitchen table or in a boardroom, know your voice really matters, and using it well is a skill that you can learn. If you want more of Scott's wisdom, pick up his book, Silence Kills, and I promise it's going to change the way you will be showing up in your conversations. Until next time, speak up, stay grounded, and lead with heart. And if you liked it, don't forget to share it with your besties, give it a like, a follow, and I will be back next week for more insightful conversations and more Steph and tips.